If you feel like you are losing your grip, might suffer a trip or abandon ship, open a can of whatever you sip and join the fellowship.
Hi there and welcome to the Fellowship of the Ring Pool. I made it. Sorry that we had to delay it a day. I don't know if you heard, but basically the travel infrastructure of the UK had a monumental meltdown yesterday. I got stuck on a train where someone had committed suicide, not on the train, but on the track. Remarkably and very sadly common thing. Hello to those on Instagram. Do join us on YouTube if you're able. And to those of you watching on YouTube or indeed on Instagram, if you go to the YouTube channel and check out the video description, there's a Google Meet where you can just, and I know that we have a lot of regulars who come back every week. That shouldn't put you off just joining in the conversation, answering, asking questions, putting your point of view forward. That's what this is all about, a fellowship. Just a place that we can all come once a week to not feel alone as struggling musicians. Actually, one of you just put up on Instagram that you were listening to Christian Henson. I talk about my brother Joe quite a lot, who is one of the most successful computer games composers in the country. But I don't often mention my brother Keaton, who's a singer-songwriter and visual artist. Absolutely fantastic, brutally honest. I think we come from a family of oversharers. That, I think, is a neurodiverse flag for you, if ever I've seen one. Because I've been travelling all over the place and God forbid, I've been at Alton Towers with 5 teenagers. I hadn't thought of a kind of a topic this week, but actually that mention of Keaton has actually made me think of a little bit of an interesting subject, and that is musicality. Now, I come from quite an unusual show business family where there's kind of schisms and different marriages and stuff. It's a very strange blended constellation of people. My elder brother adopted my mum's first marriage. I'm from my mum's second marriage, and my mum and dad had myself and then Joe, who's the aforementioned computer games composer. And then my dad remarried, and 15 years after I was born, they had Keaton. Now, Keaton grew up in a totally different environment, different household from myself, and I grew up with my two, brothers who were, closer in age. And what's really, really interesting about that scenario is, regardless of our environments, which were different, geographically different, and a different parenting dynamic, what's really interesting is myself, Joe, and I'm just going in age order, not order of importance. Myself, Joe, and Keaton are now working professional composers stroke musicians, whereas my elder brother, who is not my blood brother and is adopted, I think it's fair to say that he loves music, but isn't musical at all. And I just wanted to ask, do we think that musicality, first of all, what is it? Is it a thing? Secondly, do we think that it is environmental or something cerebral? Is it something that is a sign of neurodiversity? Or is it simply something that's carried through the generations? My grandfather was a very famous, in his day, music hall comedy star called Leslie Henson. If you Google image him, you'll see where I get my stupidity from. My dad and my mum, both my dad was a musician originally and my mum was a dancer. And we certainly grew up around a lot of music, but I wouldn't say more than other people. My dad took us to gigs and this, that, and the other. So there was definitely a bit of environmental encouragement. We were very privileged in the sense that our parents really encouraged us to pursue careers in the arts where a lot of people kind of get squashed down. But that aside, it's just very interesting that 3 people who are connected by blood and by this kind of heritage of musical parents and grandparents, it's very interesting that we have settled on lives in music, where as someone I grew up with who is as close to me and as much of a brother to me as my blood brothers isn't. So that's just a kind of a question to talk about. Musicality, environmental, emotional, or indeed genetic, do we think? And is it a thing, musicality? Alan, it's been a while since we've had some questions, and I know because, there's a couple of weeks off and stuff. There are some questions that haven't been answered. Have you got anything prepared for me this week?
Yeah, so the question this week is, what is the best live gig you've ever been to?
Ooh, what is the best live gig I've ever been to? I'm going to have to give you a top three, I'm afraid, Alan, if that's okay.
Yeah, to be fair, that's a hard question to narrow down to one person.
But I think I can do them in order. So basically, one live gig, I can't pinpoint the actual gig, but every Friday, during the kind of acid jazz funk resurgence era that was ushered in by the deregulation of the radio waves in the UK, and the first new independent radio station that was national, that hit the airwaves was Jazz FM, and suddenly there was this resurgence of interest in jazz, and it's what kind of gave us the brand new heavies and Jamiroquai and Urban Species and bands like that, D'Angelo. There was basically a night, Friday nights, at a club called the Orange in West Kensington, and a band that was called Micro Disney, that then became Microgroove. I think Disney had a word in their ear, which was fronted by a guy called Ashley Slater. And this band was just the most ferocious funk band that played. It was almost like a kind of a go-go gig. There was a real party atmosphere every Friday. He was a sensational frontman. What was interesting about the band is they didn't have a bass player. I believe he was a bass trombonist. And he was also in a band called Loose Tubes. Microgroove became Freak Power, which had a couple of really big hits under the tutelage of Norman Cook. So basically, the combined experience of those Friday nights, I'd say, would be my number three. Number two would be Colin Curry and his band performing Music for 18 Musicians. I've seen Music for 18 Musicians. I mean, I've always said that I've got two gods in my life, one, and they're both called Steve. One's Stevie Wonder, one's Steve Reich. I've seen Music for 18 live many, many times, and if you get an opportunity, go and see it, because it's not the kind of hypnotic minimalism that it comes across as on a record. It's pure vaudeville. It's very funny at points as well. I'm so familiar with the original Steve Reich and Musicians recording. I'd never seen a performance that came close until they struck up Colin Curry's band, and it was mind-boggling. And I think what I really enjoyed about it was because it was led by a percussionist, and Steve Reich was a drummer. They really focused on the tightness and the rhythmic motoring of it, whereas with other performances I've seen, there were certain elements that weren't, it was still very complex and brilliantly played, but weren't as tight. So Colin Curry, that was at the Festival Hall, not that long ago. Number one gig for me has to be Paco de la Thea, who is to flamenco guitar what Jimi Hendrix was to electric guitar. And it wasn't just witnessing him and his extraordinary group of players. It was one moment, and it was basically the whole band walked off. And you get it sometimes like when a drummer sits, or Bonham does like a 10-minute drum solo. But everyone walked off, and to my shock and horror, they left the flute player on the stage. And I was like, is this a point to go to the bar? Maybe this is going to be a long 5 minutes. Turned out it was 10 minutes, and it was nothing short of transcendental. It was the most phenomenal 10 minutes of musicianship I've ever seen, and not kind of wanking around. It was just it was like some form of flute-based hypnosis, and that has remained with me to this day. If any of you could suggest who that flute player was, that would be fantastic. If you're not familiar with Paco de la Thea, his version of Rodrigo's guitar concerto is extraordinary. He never learned how to read music, so he learned it by ear. But also Friday Night in San Francisco, which is him, John McLaughlin and Al Di Meola, is just a sensational album that really captures what is clearly a phenomenal gig. And that's a great intro into Paco de la Thea and that very, very mystical and magical world of flamenco. And it's where I learned about the concept of duende, which is something I believe in. And when we talk about musicality, duende is something that I think I'll return to, aka soul. But duende, it's literal translation is the little goblin. It's the playfulness, it's the mischievousness, it's the sexiness of musicality and what it can do for us. A few announcements to make. The Bridge Guitar Pits competition ends on Sunday. Get your submissions in. Simon, if you can remind me either on the mic or via Slack where people go to find more details about that would be great. I've just got off a train, so I'm a little bit unprepared. There is a very, very exciting Crow Hill product coming soon. So if you haven't subscribed to our mailing list, please do so. And it's worth noting also, we've reintroduced glass strings, got all sorts of new features, and we've reintroduced it with a reintroductory price, which will be ending, I think, today or tomorrow. So jump on that if you hadn't had a chance. There's new Volts coming soon, which is super cool. And then the Volts after next has got the most incredible and quite moving backstory, which I'm going to enjoy telling you all about. We've started recording a big project, massive project in Castle Sound Studios, and I'm wondering whether it'd be quite fun to kind of record it and log it in plain sight. People tend to be so secretive about these new projects, and I'm just wondering whether it'd be fun to bring you along the ride. I think currently we're booked into Castle Sound for something like 24 days. So it's a biggie, but it's very, very exciting. Castle Sound Studios is one of my top 5 studios on the planet. And some really, really fun news about Pianobook. For those of you who have not checked out pianobook.co.uk, it's a peer-to-peer network of people sharing sounds with literally no commitments to pay, and everything you get to use for life. There's no catches. It's something that I've really struggled to sustain over the years, because it really should have someone who is giving it all of their time. And I'm delighted to announce, or rather to let you know, that tomorrow we'll be putting a film up on the main Crow Hill YouTube channel regarding a new creative director for Pianobook. And if you skip along to pianobook.co.uk, you'll see that already things have started to change. We've started to tighten up the site. It looks a bit different. And I've put a couple of new sample libraries up there for you to have for free. So we'll be reinvigorating that enterprise. It got a different custodian for a couple of years who didn't really know what to do with it. Came back to me nearly a year ago, and just the bandwidth, we haven't had it. So I'm really delighted that we've got a new creative director who's been a very active player on the Pianobook community. So shall we invite people into the Google Meet, where we can, as a start for 10, talk about musicality? Is it a thing? Is it environmental? Or is it indeed something that's more genetic, musicality? And also, what would be your best gig that you've ever been to, and why? Lovely to see some old faces, and one more lift. Have we spoken before? Maybe your lighting is different. one more lift. I don't know. Hello. Do you want to unmute your microphone? Say hello. It's the little microphone icon. Is everyone hearing me okay? Thumbs up. Good stuff.
No.
One more lift.
No, we've not spoke before.
How you doing? What's your name and where are you speaking from?
Is that working?
It is. The little microphone icon. Is everyone hearing me okay? Yeah, it's got a massive delay.
No.
So
No,
one
we've
more
not
lift,
spoke
mate.
before.
How you doing? We'll catch up in a bit.
Sorry,
Anyone who
really
joins,
late speaking from Manchester.
Oh, so what's your name, mate?
Where are we? I'm sorry. There we go.
Okay,
Get sound coming from there.
Okay, we'll come back to you one more lift. Lovely to see everyone. Iago, how is Brazil? It looks sweaty.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is always. I'm in the middle of rehearsal right now. You guys just playing over there. Yeah.
More volume, Alan.
But I'm listening in all ears over here. All right. Good to see you guys every time.
So what's the lineup of the band that you're rehearsing with?
What's the line? The type?
The lineup, yeah. They're different instruments?
Oh, okay. So we have a drummer over here.
Yeah.
Drummer over here. Saxophone player here.
Great.
Bass player and guitar player as well. So saxophone, guitar, keyboards, drums. That's the gist of today.
We've had people sitting in jacuzzis, people sitting in saunas. This is my favourite. You know, someone who's actually at the coalface, drilling away, and managing to get on to Google Meet. Iago, before I let you go, are you using one of those strange Yamaha desks?
Yamaha desks? What kind?
You told me that everyone in Brazil uses this Yamaha desk.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, not today, because I'm at the studio of the company. So here I use Apollos, X8Ps, Apollos. But those early nights, like yesterday, and yesterday after that, I was using the old Yamahas, yes.
Yeah, just
we even use those PCB, like big cards, old cards that you had to buy on eBay because you cannot find them anywhere.
Just before I let you go, Iago, what are the Yamaha desks that everyone seems to use in Brazil?
Well, M7CL and PM4000. Like the M7CL, you can find it almost everywhere. It's amazing how they manage to keep the desks running and everything. It's uncanny even.
Brilliant stuff. Well, I'll let you get back to your rehearsals, Iago. Great,
all right.
Great to see you. And apologies again to everyone for postponing yesterday. Someone threw themselves on a train track that I was queued behind. It's quite unusual when you travel up and down the East Coast, as I do all the time. You become aware that suicides are quite common. And just to be a bit dark about things, they have cleanup squads all the way down the East Coast line, and it takes 20 minutes. So there we go. I think we need to change the subject quite rapidly. The question I was asking is musicality. What is it? Do we think it is a thing? And, I was just talking about the fact that I've got 3 brothers, 2 of which are blood relatives, one of which who's not a blood relative. 2 of us, so my kind of half brother and my fully blood brother, grew up in one environment, and then my other half brother grew up in another. And 3 of us, the guys who have the same, genes, we're all working professional composers. And I was just wondering, is it less about environment and more about genes, or is it about neurodivergence, diversity, all of that kind of stuff? So that's a question. And I was also asked what was my favourite gig of all time, and my number one gig has to be Paco de Lucia, or Lucia, who was to flamenco guitar what Jimi Hendrix was to electric guitar. Alan, the view that we've got up at the moment, I can't see if there's kind of a hold up list. It's the 3 dots at the very bottom. Yeah, there you go. Adjust view, and it's we get a little cue. Okay, is it there? Great. So inviting anyone to come in with chats about whether they think musicality is a thing and what was their favourite gig of all time. It's interesting how so many gigs you go to, you kind of just take it in your stride when people are alive, and then when they pass away, you just go, fuck me. I saw B.B. King twice. I saw James Brown play live. And Alan, you've recently returned from London from an extraordinary gig, haven't you?
Yeah, so I saw Stevie Wonder a couple of weeks ago.
That'll do it.
Yeah, it was one of those life-changing gigs. Hyde Park, beautiful weather, and just one of the greatest musicians, songwriters. Yeah, absolutely incredible.
I think we may have mentioned this before, but I'd like to ask those assembled or those on Instagram why it was that Stevie Wonder used a clavinet on Superstition. Why did Stevie Wonder use a clavinet on Superstition? Jay, the first to come in. How you doing, mate?
Good. I just came back from a meeting with film festival people. I might be doing a masterclass on production sound, so that's interesting. Anyway, there is a video somewhere in the internet about why the clavinet, because from the girl that plays with Stevie Wonder now, I'll link it up because it exists and they explain it. It was something about it was there in the studio and he wanted a very funky sounding situation. And the clavinet was just greedy enough, something that the Wurlitzer was not giving him, but also the fact that it doesn't sustain naturally. And so a bunch of the things that the clavinet was just known for and the greedy sound became the reason why he chose that. I will find that video and send it over because it exists there and the answer is out there in the world.
So, Jay, I'm going to offer up an alternative truth about Superstition. Superstition, the version that you hear, which is Stevie Wonder playing absolutely everything except for the brass, was actually a demo because there was some kind of favour debt that he had with another musician. And so he actually didn't write it for him. It wasn't going to go on his album. He wrote it for Jeff Beck and the Jeff Beck group. And the reason he used the clavinet was he was mapping out the guitar part. And if you look up, if you Google or wherever you get your music from, Superstition by the Jeff Beck group, it is absolutely phenomenal version of Superstition. But legend has it that Barry Gordy heard the demo that Stevie had made for Jeff Beck and just went, fuck that, that's going on your album, Talking Book, which was one of the very few interventions I think Barry Gordy was allowed to make at that stage in Stevie Wonder's career. So that's the alternative truth. The other thing I think that is really worth checking out is Quincy Jones' version of Superstition. I don't know if anyone's heard that. That is, I think that is a summary of how cool Stevie Wonder is, because it's all done on harmonicas with these really low bass harmonicas, and they sound like didgeridoos, and it's this like really ambient, almost like voodoo-like version of Superstition. With Quincy Jones was never scared of using a bit of splosh and stuff, and it's really hypnotic and stuff, but with these extraordinary harmonicas. I don't know if anyone's worked with the bass harmonica. They're really quite extraordinary, very, very difficult to play, and they look very funny because they're absolutely enormous. So Stevie Wonder, has anyone got any gigs that they'd like to talk about? On the way up from London today, there are lots of Oasis fans, and I don't know if you guys in your different countries are experiencing this, but people just watch shit on speakers on their phones now. I sound like a grumpy old man. But, love or loathe Oasis, the timbre of their records and the singing style is not something that is that pleasurable to my ears. And hearing numerous phones on one train carriage playing phone footage of an Oasis gig they'd just been to, I put my noise reduction headphones on with nothing on them. I just literally just turned the world down. Merlin, how are you doing, sir?
Hi, I'm doing good. I'm finally gonna soon be able to leave Portugal. Sounds weird because it's actually a great place to be, but I'm eager to go home. What you're describing about the train experience, that sounds like a customized personal version of hell for me. So I'm glad you made it through that. I was thinking the whole time since the call started about like what was my favorite gig ever that I went to, and it's impossible to pick, but I actually did remember something. And I'm afraid I have to say it was that one gig my friend dragged me to in Berlin, where I neither know the name of the venue or the band. We just happened ending up there, and was just a phenomenal. It was a tiny room, and the vibe of this band playing was mind-blowing. Like, never have I ever stood in a concert situation and feel like my brain was transformed by what was happening on stage. I don't know to this day who that band is. I don't know if they have records out there or what that was, but that would have been my favorite gig of all time. So it was just some people really doing some magic up there.
I love a gig. I love a surprise gig when you're dragged along. My wife dragged me along to support a parent that we met at the school gates. It was his first gig with his new music promotional company, and he brought this saxophonist up from over from America to perform in Edinburgh. And I've always, somewhat jokingly, I've always talked about my dislike of saxophones. Alan's a saxophonist. I like saxophones in a section, but basically it comes from the trauma bond I have with the 1980s and those guys with that, when middle eights were just growling saxes with horrible eventide harmonizers on. So that's why I have a kind of a phobia. It's just a little bit like olives that actually when you eat one, they're fine. But, the idea of them terrifies me. That and prunes. And yeah, saxophone, it's the prune of the music. No, I'll shut up, Alan, sorry. So I basically was going to go to a gig, a saxophone gig. And I just I agreed with my wife that if the drummer started playing the archetypal Fusac beat, which is offbeat snare, that I would be allowed to leave. And the gig was a gentleman called Colin Stetson. I don't know if you've heard of this guy. But if you imagine that Mad Max Fury Road had a house band that was led by a saxophonist, that is Colin Stetson. He plays a large baritone saxophone, bass saxophone, that's battered to shit, and he's got pickups on all of the things. And he basically took a deep breath, and he does that circular breathing. He took a deep breath, and he didn't stop playing that thing for about 2 hours. And it was just like he opened up the pits of hell. But, good hell. It was so dark. And I believe that Colin Stetson did the score for a horror movie by the director who did Midsommar. Was it Hereditary? And that's a pretty incredible score, that. And that features his very, very scary saxophone. That's something worth checking out, actually. I called him up, actually. I got his number from my friend. I called him up during lockdown to see if he'd be interested in doing sample library, and he answered the phone. He's hard as nails. He answered the phone. He goes, "So you're from Spitfire, are you?" And I went, "Yeah." And he goes, "You're not going to ask me to do a fucking sample library, are you?" So excuse my American accent. So that conversation got off to a good start. It reminds me of the time that we got Headley Grange, which is the place where they famously did that famous drum sound for Led Zeppelin, and it's where they recorded Stairway to Heaven and stuff. We managed to convince the owners to let us in. And once we got agreement from the owners to record some drums at Headley Grange, I turned to the people I was working with at Spitfire and we said, we can probably get any drummer to come in here to record. So we managed to get Chad Smith from Chili Peppers and Roger Taylor from Queen, who always was quite jealous of John Bonham's drum sound. But we wanted to do a pre-production chat about what was required of them. And I said to the team, it's really easy. I'll just say to Roger, it's just like doing a sound check, doing samples. And picked up the phone. He's got quite a high voice. He goes, "Hello." And went, "Hi, Roger. Thanks for coming online. Really looking forward to this weekend. Just wanted to talk you through what we need from you for the sample session." He goes, "Just tell me it's not a fucking sound check." And that was another conversation that became more difficult. I got my business partner to do that session. I did the Chad Smith one. I feel like I'm waffling. Does anyone have any gigs that they went to they want to talk about? Or indeed, talking about this musicality thing, is it something, are you a member of a family where you're the only musical one in the family, or do you come from a long line of it? Is it environmental or genetic? So we got some raised hands. Sorry, I'm getting used to this display. Kent, how are you doing, sir?
Doing well. How are you guys?
Yeah, apologies, I didn't see that there was loads of hands raised. Apologies, my fault. I wouldn't have waffled so long. And now I'll stop.
But yeah, no, I'm doing fine. I think so. In my family, it's my older sister and myself who were sort of the music lovers of the family. My dad is pretty much only reserved in the categories from 1978 to 1989. That pretty much is like his ballpark of music. But my older sister and I, we're into everything. And one day, she doesn't give me a choice. She just comes to the house and she's just like, "Okay, get into the car. We're going 2 hours down. We're going 2 hours to another town because to see the Lumineers." And we saw the Lumineers play at this really, really tiny bar. And I was quite surprised that this bar managed to get them because at the time they were still really huge. But what surprised me is that the bar had a pretty good stage and sound system that you can hear them. But because it was so intimate, you could hear literally everything. And at the time they had their cellist. And so like on all their songs, you could like literally hear them like actually play. And that was really cool. There was this was not a high-tech place to be having lip syncing. That's for damn sure. It was just microphone, instrument, and then play. But that was a very fun one.
Sounds amazing. I have a friend who went to a gig once by the Saccone Quartet, and they basically had ECG monitors on, and everyone got to hold one of the musicians. So you basically had one of 4 little orbs that you could hold, and you would feel their heartbeats. And it sounds gimmicky, but apparently it was really it was a way of really connecting with the band. Jay, over to you.
Favorite gigs. I have 2. One would be I saw Emery at the Echoplex, but it was like an acoustic secret show. So it was something about maybe 50 people in a venue. Consider this is a venue that holds maybe 500. Like 50 people at this venue, acoustic show. Everybody was on the floor. Like we were sitting on the floor of the like what would be the dance floor for the stage, and they were on the floor as well with us, and hanging out. It was amazing. That would be one. And then for any like hardcore fans, Enter Shikari. Also at the somewhere in LA. I don't remember what theater. It doesn't matter. what matters and why I think this is important to point out. Enter Shikari is such a band, a thing, a concept. If you guys haven't heard of them, look them up. They're British, by the way. But everything they do, like their philosophy behind their music, is it's very much about unity and things. So it was like a very unified. Like when you were there with everybody. It was not like I did not see a phone up filming that day that I can remember, and that was impressive, honestly.
It's so bizarre that you bring that up. They talk about higher power and signs, and I must give him a call. Enter Shikari, if I'm correct, if I'm wrong, they kind of play. It's kind of like the structure of their music is very similar to techno, but it's with heavy guitars and stuff. But
I would say it's backwards. I would say it's more like heavy guitars with a lot of techno things, because it's very synthy, but they also have like their DJ remixes that they do themselves. It's very interesting. You just like you guys just have to look it up.
But what's extraordinary about this is the first time on this podcast that I've mentioned my brother Keaton Henson. And my brother Keaton Henson designed the album cover of Enter Shikari's first album. How odd is that? How odd is that? It almost looks like a coat of arms or something. And that was, Keaton's a visual artist, but he then decided to become more of a solo artist. But he was wanting to be an album cover designer, and he was mates with them. Yeah.
So this tattoo right here, this is a line from a lyric from that album. Fun fact.
Wow. That's David O'Rourke, how are you, sir?
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Gigs. When I still lived in Ireland, when Sinatra came to town, it was with Liza Minnelli and Sammy Davis, and then all three combined for the finale. And for me, it was hearing those orchestrations live, not transcriptions by other people, but the real deal. And I just remember thinking that I hope he sticks to his jazzier repertoire when Sinatra came on, because I want to hear some of those arrangements live. And when he did his version of For Once in My Life, the groove, if anyone's ever heard that version by Sinatra, it starts off with a pickup. It goes ba-do-ba-da. They're already slowing it down in the pickup. In those three, they're pulling back the beat, but they know where it's going to land in the rhythm section. That was very unusual for me living in Ireland to hear that kind of interpretation. Other ones for nostalgia, Paul McCartney, the first time I saw him live in New York, because I grew up with the whole Wings and Beatles and stuff like that. But the other topic that you brought up, and just wondering about it, when you're talking about natural ability or soul or feeling or whatever in the music, I think it's similar to it's a chemistry that you're affected by certain things. Like, not wanting to embarrass him yet again, I said, when Charles speaks with that voice of his, it's there's a sincerity behind it. It's kind of like a gravitas when we hear him speak, and it's usually saying something kind about somebody. And I think the same thing happens when people touch an instrument or when they sing. There's a connection that's made, especially if it's coming from a sincere place. And that would be my take on it. It's down to the chemistry of what we're like. I'm one of these people. I love Bob Dylan. I'm not going to accuse him of, or wouldn't have, of singing in pitch until I heard him doing the Barbra Streisand thing recently, and also Return to Me for The Sopranos, which a friend of mine said was the first time he ever heard Bob Dylan sing. But I've loved Bob Dylan from freewheeling days because I like the sound of his voice, and I like the groove that he plays. I love Stevie Wonder for similar reasons. They have something very special. If that makes any sense in the equation.
I saw an interview with Quincy Jones today, and there's a couple of things to touch on with him, and he just goes on, I just wait for the goosebumps, and then there's just no arguing with that. He goes, I don't need to market research a song. If it gives me goosebumps, then it makes the grade. But also, you know, I have to admit total ignorance to Quincy Jones' involvement with Frank Sinatra. And with a lot of the arrangements that he did. And when you hear Frank on those records, you know, saying like "Take It Away, Q" and all of that, he's referring to Quincy Jones. If you haven't watched the Quincy Jones documentary, I think that's a must-see, because he was made of different stuff, Quincy. Absolutely fantastic. And I'm very, very envious that you got to see Frank Sinatra live. Certainly when I was growing up, I remember Frank Sinatra records used to be in a part of like your Tower Records or whatever called easy listening, and it was very kind of sneered upon. But now listening back to it, there's never a bad time for a bit of Frank, I don't think. And certainly with Liza Minnelli, Jeepers, and Sammy Davis must have been amazing. Noah, how are you?
I've been pretty good. How have you been?
Yeah, good. Where are you speaking from?
I'm speaking from Arkansas in the United States.
Brilliant. I'm pretending to nod and know where that is, but I have no idea.
It's like nearly dead center in like the full U.S. pretty much. It's a little towards the south end, but it is really, really hot here right now.
Which is why your president's been hanging out up around the corner from us here.
Yeah.
Getting away from that here.
But I had a comment about the musicality thing. It was interesting. Both my parents are not really musically inclined, but both my brother and I, like towards when we were becoming adults, we really started getting into music, making music, writing music. Both of us at first really being interested in electronic music. I kind of went a different way with some solo piano stuff, and he's like really into sound textures and all this different kind of stuff. But we had none of that growing up at all. It was like mostly like our parents would listen to either rock, rap, or just mostly mainstream stuff. So out of where that came from, I don't exactly know, but it's really interesting because, again, both of us have a really deep love for music, but it didn't stem from our upbringing, really.
No, it's fascinating. I almost see it. It's a fascinating thing, and it's fascinating how you get these clusters of music makers within families that don't necessarily, you know, have that. Tradition is also very, very common, but there does seem to be some, well, certainly in my experience, some kind of bloodline connection. And certainly whenever I've been in bands I was in a couple of bands with my brother, there's a particular special understanding musically there, I think, and some really big arguments as well. I feel for the fellow bandmates of the Gallaghers in Oasis. It must be an absolute nightmare. Charles, someone has been speaking so kindly of you about you having kind things to say, but I can see you're on the warpath today. I'm joking.
No, I'm not on the warpath, but I want to start with an apology to you, Christian, because of your distaste for saxophone, for that painting back there. And I hope you aren't offended. Anyway, favorite gig. You've taken me down memory lane, and I haven't thought about this in years. I was on a business trip before I was actually in the music business. I was still in the machine design business, in the family business decades ago, and had to go to Los Angeles. And some friends of mine lived, where did they live? Santa Barbara, I think they were in Santa Barbara. So I called them up. I said, I'm in LA, blah, 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 blah. Let's go to dinner. So we went to the then, and I think it's closed now, Coconut Grove. And Tony Bennett was the entertainment, the singer. I mean, he was the he and a band were there. At that time, I think Ralph Sharon was his music director. And The Sandpiper had just come out, the film with Elizabeth Taylor. And I think it was Lalo Schifrin who wrote The Shadow of Your Smile. No, was it Lalo Schifrin? I can't remember. At any rate, do you know, David? Was it Lalo Schifrin?
Johnny Mandel.
Oh, okay, Johnny Mandel. I apologize. Anyway, so when the band was fantastic. It's all studio players and the local hires in LA, and some of whom I actually ended up working with later, but that's another story. Anyway, Bennett did a little presentation before he sang the song, describing who wrote the song, Mandel, and where the song came from for the film. And then Sharon gave the downbeat. And I guarantee you, it was paralyzingly beautiful, the arrangement. I haven't thought about this in years. I'm not going to sing it now, but the way he just came into The Shadow of Your Smile, and the way he came into that phrase, very legato, when you are gone, and then the band, and it was a big band, like four trombones, 4 trumpets, sax section. They didn't blare at all. They just kind of emerged behind it. And the whole crowd, and I remember seeing Julie London show up, if you know who she was. She was a great jazz singer, and I can't remember a lot of actors and actresses who I didn't know personally then, but eventually met. But it was just, and I've seen Getz live, I've seen Monk live, I've seen Brubeck live, I've seen Kenton live, but I don't recall that I ever had a feeling like I did at that Tony Bennett thing. The way he did that was just unbelievable. And he was in his prime. This was probably 1968, 1969. But that was a gig I will never forget. And just the way that band played it was fantastic. The rockers, I listen to rock because I want to be educated, but I don't know a lot of these new bands, and that's nobody's fault. You just kind of go with your generation. But and Christian, if you want to really listen to sax players who do not blare, and I'm with you on that, I can't stand that crap. But go further back to listen to people like Paul Desmond and Art Pepper. I think I've listed them. Stan Getz, John Coltrane, of course. Yeah. Zoot Sims. You listen to that era, it really changes your point of view on what the sax can do. The other guy, I have no idea why they do all those effects and honk. And with all due respect to his career, I find Kenny G one of the most boring musicians I've ever heard. It's just, I think what he should be is he should be in the medical field as an anesthetician, because he puts me to sleep, and maybe he would help surgeries in other cases. I don't know. End of story.
Well, I think it's funny that I don't know if Mandy's still here, but I saw that Mandy had contributed to Kenny G's retirement fund by drinking from a Starbucks cup. I don't know if you're aware of Kenny G's involvement with Starbucks, but he's so we have Mandy to thank today for Kenny G's ongoing legacy. I kid with you, Mandy, if you're still there. Iago, it's brilliant. I'm watching you say things to the people you're rehearsing with, and I'm just imagining that you're just kind of turn around and go, no, better, play it better, tighter. Anyway, more cowbell.
Basically this. Jay, it was live in Houston from memory because I love that record, by the way. Christian, you may hear also a saxophone in the background. Hope there's no problem there. Such a loud instrument anyway. So my start for today, for the best show, best live performance thing. Some guys called me out of the blue and said, are you able to fly to Uruguay to mix a show for us. I didn't even knew who the guys were anyway. So they okay, we are this band called Sexy Sanitary, and I want you to mix the thing and film and everything. I said, okay, let's do this. So I went to the show and I was like vibing with them because I was doing live mixing and filming with the other hand. So amazing! The show is amazing. Okay, these guys played really, really well. So I went inside the stage to film with the GoPro in my hand, and I ended up face planting the floor because I tripped on the cables in the middle of the performance. So there you go. That's a live performance I'll never forget. The other one is an honorable mention. It was a show of Paul McCartney in São Paulo, Allianz Park. It was really amazing because everyone was crying, and I was crying with them because I felt what they felt. And it's amazing to be a Beatles fan since the beginning and then see a Beatle live. This was amazing. Yeah. That's my story for today.
Amazing. I had the pleasure of working with Abe Laboriel Jr., who's his drummer. And I said, what is it like playing Live and Let Die live in stadiums or stadia? And he said, it's just like, you know, you're playing it not in a cover band, you're playing it with the guy who wrote it. And we won't talk about the reggae middle eight, which is problematic for me. Merlin, back to you, sir.
Yeah, thanks. So I just wanted to share my thought on the whole musicality thing. Honestly, I may be a bit of an oddball, but I think everything you mentioned, you know, like environment or like encouragement or all of that, genetics, etc. I think all of these are maybe like ways that can lead there, you know, but I think it's like sort of a all the ways lead to Rome kind of situation. Like I think there's a lot of ways to tap into it or to find it within yourself or to get it. But my best approximation of having a thought about where it comes from or what it is, I think is like, for me, music is like quite a spiritual thing in a very broad sense of the word. And so I think musicality for me, and whether you have it or not, kind of comes down to like a mixture of vulnerability and faith. And that's because I think when you're making music, especially when you're playing with others or playing for people, but in general, I think you're putting a piece of your soul in there, and to show that and to share that or to even experience that, I think you need a certain willingness to be vulnerable, to be touched by something so, you know, profoundly. It's very intimate. It's one of the most magical things I know. And faith, because I don't care what the faith is that everyone has, you know, whether it's like God or the universe or any kind of version of it, but I think it has to do with feeling that sort of liminal thing that happens when music is magic, that everybody knows that feeling of being magically connected to other players, to other listeners, to other musicians, to the band. And there's kind of a transcendence in it, something that's bigger. And I don't know what to call that, but I think to me it's like one of the most central things that is why I have faith in there being something, you know, whatever the right or way to call it is, I don't care. But I think when you're a musician and you develop your musicality, you need to be willing to believe that, to have that kind of faith. Otherwise, I don't see how you could have the courage to have that continued vulnerability as well. So that's my 2 cents.
A really profound thing to say, and it brings up to, before I move on to you, Elliot, it brings up 2 things that I think that is really interesting for people to look at is the work of Sheldrake and his study of quantum entanglement and how you can separate 2 electrons from the same nuclei and put them literally on the other the opposite ends of the universe, and they will remain in sync. And quite a romantic thought is, what if it is the kind of cosmic music that is holding them together? But we've all, speaking of live gigs, I think that we're so centered in on the recording industry, but just going back to the literal meaning of it, it's a record of a performance. It's like a file or a photograph. And I think that the true transcendency does come from experiencing these things live, and not necessarily live in arenas with, the drummer playing to a click and backing tracks and all of that. It'll be those smaller, more intimate gigs where just that something magic happens and everyone shares something that is, I think, akin to some form of quantum entanglement. It's all understood but not said is pretty magical. And where vulnerability is concerned, I've always maintained that the greatest singers of all time, even the belters, even the divas, they have something in their voice that expresses vulnerability and pain. A good example, I think, is Whitney Houston, I Will Always Love You. The double chorus at the end, she goes so sharp. She's singing so inaccurately, but it expresses, it literally is her taking it to 11. By singing imperfectly, she's given us this sense of vulnerability. I've always felt that Tupac Shakur has a real, there's absolute agony in his voice. There's real pain, even if he's like dissing Biggie Smalls or whatever. Even a belter like Aretha Franklin, there's pain and agony. It all stems back to the blues and stuff. Alan's got his scheduled meeting with a throne downstairs. And I think possibly it's why I don't connect so well with aria and oratorio in opera, because there is this kind of clamoring for perfection, and I'm sure there'll be people who completely disagree with me, but there's this clamoring for perfection and just pure power that I don't connect to as much. But I think it's what's problematic with autotune is it's Botox for the voice, really, in my mind, and for me it's a suppression of expression. Elliot, sorry to keep you waiting.
That's just interesting to hear, but the whole nature versus nurture thing for music I found quite interesting quite recently. So I've always grown up around instruments. My mum could play a little bit of violin and piano. There's always a piano in the house, always a few guitars around, but it never really caught my interest until I was about 11 or 12, about 11. And my brother brought home this knockoff Dean Flying V looking guitar. And I was like, what the hell is that? And it's electric guitar. And I was like, God, I haven't put it down since. But what was really interesting is I lost my dad when I was about 13 or so. So I only ever knew him as like a parent, but not as an adult or his interests, that kind of stuff. I knew he used to play, or I didn't even know he used to play guitar. I knew he had a guitar because he worked in the Merchant Navy, went all over the world and would collect things, which is his excuse for buying stuff, as far as I'm aware. And he bought a Spanish guitar, and it always sat there. And recently, my brother, who had bought this guitar, had reached out on a few Navy pages on Facebook and asked if anyone knew of our dad and had any stories or anything about this. And someone wrote in and said about how much he never ever put the guitar down, which is something that none of us knew, how much he used to play guitar in his youth. And it's so interesting. Like, obviously, I know there's guitars there, but the fact he used to play it so much, apparently, it was like really kind of nice to kind of learn about. And also the fact that he loved Bourbon Biscuits, which is my favorite as well. But going on to the best shows, I've been to like quite a few shows that I think they're really good, but on a different angle, shows that have been really influential, I'd say there's the first time I ever saw Muse. So I picked up electric guitar, discovered Muse, go hand in hand quite well. But the first time I saw them at the O2 Arena, and they had this, I think it was the Resistance tour, and had these 3 big pillars on stage. And they had this intro track that's just like an arpeggiated synth thing. But I disappeared somewhere into this music. And when the curtains came down, the Muse were there, and it was like you were hearing this stuff. And it was the first time I've really been to a big concert. It was like, I definitely want to do something in music. And the other really influential thing was maybe 5 years ago. My other half does like filming, like wedding filming, but sometimes we get hired out to do like commercial filming. We got hired out to film a orchestra playing the hits of John Williams down in what's the Portsmouth? That was it. And something about she said, "Do I want to go?" That wasn't needed, but if I was to hold a camera and just look interesting and look busy, then I could go. So I was like, obviously. And that feeling of standing next to the conductor while they're playing the suite from E.T. was like something kind of confirmed in me that this is what I want to do. I want to make music. I want to stand in front of an orchestra. I want to hear my music be made out loud. So, yeah, that's my 2 cents into the conversation.
Lovely stuff, Elliot. Before I move on to Mark, what do you think of Muse's latest single?
To be fair, I've only listened to it very briefly. I know that Dan Lancaster's been touring with them, and I think it's done a lot of the mixing on some of their stuff, and I love his style of mixing. From what I remember, it's taken quite a heavy dive, which I quite approve of. But it's a bit different to you're about to listen to like my favourite album of theirs, which is Origin of Symmetry. So it's a bit different, but I'm digging it. I'm digging it.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's a masterclass in mixing. It's phenomenal, and I couldn't work out how they get that guitar sound. So I did a little bit of poking around on the internet, and I counted the number of machine heads on his guitar for that song when they play it live. There's eight fucking strings on that guitar.
There's I think Dan Lancaster. I know he's been touring with them live, but he did a video masterclass. I can't remember what it's called, but he did the mixing for the Bring Me the Horizon album. That's the Spirit, and there's the track on there called Doom, which is just insane. This track, but he has like a 2-hour breakdown going through the actual mix stems, which he gives to you of how he mixed it and why he mixed this kind of stuff. If anyone can find that, I can't remember what it's called. I'll try and have a look through and post a link. But it's like I learned so much watching that video, and especially for that kind of genre and style of sound. It was amazing to watch someone to mix that live. Thanks. I'll try and find it and I'll post a link up.
I think something we should start, because there's been so many really good, interesting things brought up today. I think what we should start doing with these podcasts is linking to all of these different things that people are mentioning, because I think there's so many kind of really the great thing about bringing people from all over the world, of all ages, all different tastes and backgrounds, is the discovery of stuff that we can't take everything in. So that's something I think that we will start doing in the video description, is where we can is find the links to these various different things that people are bringing up. Mr. Mark Taylor, how are you?
I'm good. A long time no talk. I was just when you mentioned about Piano Book, like at the beginning of the stream, I was just very curious to look at what it looked like, and I like how it's looking so far. I like how the images are no longer black and white when you click on them. But I also got one thing I will say. Recently, you remember how the last time I talked, I said, well, this was ages, like weeks ago, where I said that my internet was very bad. Well, as it turns out, it's almost like as if my brother and sister heard me, because we got a new router. So yeah, there's that. So I've been bloody busy lately.
Brilliant. Well, good news on the router. Next thing, a better microphone, Mark. It's pretty ropey.
Yeah, believe it or not, it's just a phone mic that I've got.
Okay.
So
well, I
can't really get.
I've been sampling roller coasters for the last 2 days. I've taken a bunch of teenagers to a place called Alton Towers. Awful Towers, as I think it should be called. But there is one roller coaster called the Oblivion, which is just this vertical drop into this huge tube, and I think it's going to create one of the biggest booms yet committed to a sampler. But something I am investigating is the different microphones that you get in phones, and I think that's going to be a new video that we're making, is trying out where the microphones are and what's the best way to record with them. That's something that's worth looking out for. I have to say, something also worth checking out is if you want to hear something insanely fat. I watched with one of my kids. What's the Michael Keaton film? Is it Pacific Heights, about the dodgy tenant? With a score by what's his name? Gremlins. Larry. The alien guy, Jerry Goldsmith. Larry Goldsmith. Oh my God, sin bin for me. Jerry Goldsmith, and I think he's playing with, it's probably a Fairlight sampler, and there are some stabs on that are so fat. And I'm just wondering if it's the sampling algorithm of the Fairlight that just gives it that bottom end. But it's like, that must have been mind-blowing when that film came out. Yeah.
Apparently, Pacific Heights, the 1990 film?
Yeah.
It's Hans Zimmer that did the music.
Oh, no! It's Hans Zimmer!
So
No. I'm sorry. I'm very tired. It wasn't Pacific Heights. It was Sleeping with the Enemy. Can you check that was Larry Goldsmith? Yes, it was Sleeping with the Enemy. So I've been doing an 80s thriller thing with my kids. Jeepers, there were a lot of boobs and willies in those films back in the day. We've cleaned up practice. That's Larry Goldsmith.
Goldsmith.
Okay. Brilliant. Okay, I've got to stop speaking because obviously I'm going to just work myself into a horrific embarrassment. Jonathan, is it Jonathan Melee? You just need to hit your mic.
There. You got me?
Yeah, gotcha.
Can you hear me? Is it normal sounding?
It's normal sounding.
All right, good. I'm sitting in my car in between two different gigs today, so I figured I'd finally join in. I've been enjoying watching this for a few months at least. And David O'Rourke, who's a good friend of mine, is like, you got to join, you got to come in. So thank you for doing this. It's wonderful.
Great stuff. Where are you speaking from other than your car?
I live just east of New York. Excuse me, just east of New York City in a place called Long Island, but everyone thinks that Long Island is that I'm way out east. I'm about 20 miles from Manhattan, an easy train ride, so close to Manhattan.
Fantastic. Well, it's lovely, and please do join us again, Jonathan. Do you have any notable?
Absolutely.
Do you have any notable gigs that
I do. So I have a couple of things, and I know you hate saxophones, and probably even hate Michael Brecker the most because he can be very screechy at times, I think. But I saw a gig where he played in New York City a long time ago with a lot of jazz luminaries who folks may or may not know, but Pat Metheny was on the gig, and Dave Holland was playing bass, and Jack DeJohnette was playing drums. So a very, very much a quintet of masters. And it felt like the whole room levitated, and I was kind of standing off the side in a club in Manhattan called Birdland and sort of watching the bass player and the drummer interact. And they were kind of just laughing back and forth as they were playing and it was truly amazing. One of those moments where just the hair on the back of my neck stood up. And that was, for me, one of the most amazing, incredible gigs I'd ever seen. And the other one I'll say was a person who I was in the presence of, who I was not a huge fan of before I met them. But I sort of played with them a little bit and had the opportunity to record with them also a little bit. And I will say that there are certain people in the world that have an undeniable power. And I'm not typically an airy kind of, or whatever, kind of an aura person, but this person definitely had that. And I ended up recording with him when I lived in Ireland, and it was a pretty incredible experience. I also auditioned for his band and didn't get it, which is another story. Yeah, those are the kind of the two things. I also did see Frank Sinatra in Las Vegas in the late 80s, early 90s. So his son was conducting the orchestra, Frank Sinatra Jr., and Frank was kind of forgetting some of the words, and his son kind of had to whisper in his ear a few times. There was a teleprompter, but the voice, the instrument was still incredible. The whole big band was insanity. I think it was probably, I assume it was all Las Vegas guys. But anyways, those are sort of my 3 gig highlight things that I've seen that are fascinating.
Brilliant stuff. Well, thanks again for joining us, Jonathan. Back to you, Charles.
I can't remember who lit the fuse about emotion and music, and you talked about the connectivity of music. And I have, if you email me, I'll send you a link. I produced a session decades ago, and I hired a session singer in LA, a woman. And the thing that I really didn't like about session producers, to be blunt, I don't know if it's a disease or what, and I've worked with directors in acting like this, but they want to micromanage every damn thing you do, and I don't like that. And so the singer came in, and it was a thing that I'd already recorded with my voice, and it's orchestrated, all LA session players. But she sang in the same key I did. So I said, I want you to sing these songs. There's 2 songs. One is called Blue Year Resolution, and the other one is called What's Wrong with Being Blue. And so she went into the studio and she sang it. And I knew she was a session singer because I used her on a background group one time. And she came in, and in terms of session singing, it was perfect. Now, I'm saying that in terms of LA session perfect. I think it was Merlin that lit the fuse about this emotion thing and the connectivity, and, we connect. I'll say her first name. So she came in and she looked at me very nervously because she'd never done solo work for me before. And I knew immediately what the problem was. She was used to being at sessions where, am I okay? With who knows who. So she looked at me and said, "What, was it okay?" And I said to her, "Linda, you know that story." "What do you mean?" "The lyrics, you know that story." "Yes." "Well, just go back in the studio and tell the story. Whether it's in tune or not is irrelevant. Just go tell the story. I'll be glad to share the takes with you. Not the perfect take, but the take that made the difference." Actually, there's 2 songs, because in one of them she started to cry, and that's the take I kept. When the session was over, she left, and I may have told this story before. The guy who owned the studio was also a producer, and she left, and he turned around and he said, "Man, I could never get her to sing like that." And I said, "You wouldn't let her."
Yeah.
And I guess I'm kind of counseling people. If you're going to produce, leave the people alone. Because if you don't think they can do the job, for heaven's sakes, don't hire them in the first place. Well, in my mind, I was a trombone player, and I can't tell you how many times, and I think I've said this before, Christian, in voiceover, even with audiobooks, in my mind, I'm thinking, you have hired me to play the trombone. May I please move the slide?
Yeah.
If you get my drift. But anyway, I'll be glad to anybody who wants that. I'll post my email on the discussion today, and then email me and I'll send you a link to this woman's performance, because it is unbelievable what she does with these songs, particularly at one point where I thought everybody else I knew would have run out of breath, and she sings across the phrase. Like, how did she do that? Anyway, so I'll put my email up here, and then email me, and if you like it, you like it. And it's not about my song, and it's not about anything other than the way this woman sings. If you like the song, that's a bonus. But I want you to hear this girl sing.
Brilliant. Thank you, Charles. over to you, One More Lift. Sorry to keep you waiting.
Is my microphone working this time?
Yeah, and you're in sync, and it's beautiful. So I didn't catch your name the first time round.
Sorry, my name's Adam. I'm a crane driver, so the One More Lift is a bit of a play on that. So, if that makes any sense. It's the worst thing you want to wear. Everyone says is one more lift, and it just goes on and on and on. Yeah.
So I just don't know how you do it, those cranes. But bloody hell, Manchester has changed.
Been busy.
Yeah, I bet you have. I mean, for those of you who haven't got, Manchester is it's a incredible city, and it was an industrial powerhouse and stuff, but it has literally these high-rise buildings have over the last 10 years have sprung up everywhere. And it is also becoming a real contestant to the dominance of London where post-production is concerned. So basically, for the last 3 years, I've not been down to London to attend a dub. It's all been happening in Manchester. So it's remarkable how it's changing.
If you need a parking space, let me know.
Will do. So what do you do, Adam, other than being a crane operator?
When I'm up there, I'm usually listening to you telling me how I should be doing my orchestration, and I'm trying to make music for computer games in my part time. I've had 2 jobs, programming computer games and driving tower cranes for the last 20 plus years. So it'd be good if I can learn how to do the music, because I already know the programming bit, and then I can put them both together. But to answer your question on the gigs, it wasn't one I actually went to. My dad decided it'd be a good idea to drive past Main Road while Jean-Michel Jarre was playing, and we was driving in an MG convertible. This is going back a long time, and the lights and the music that had such an impact on me. It changed the way I viewed music. So I blame Jean-Michel Jarre, my dad, and an MG convertible. But the first time music sort of hit me in a big space was at a theme park, believe it or not, listening to John Williams going around a theme park. I wanted to get involved from that point. And as a junior saxophonist, if you need to learn music, start with a saxophone, because you have no alternative. You have to learn music.
I'm surrounded by them. I've got Alan's been heckling this entire gig. Going, shut up. And when someone said a bad word about Michael Brecker, it was like we nearly lost the podcast producer. What we're going to do is it's close to the end, but I'm going to attempt to pronounce your name, Ziganik. Is that correct? Is that your name, or is that just your kind of nom de guerre? Ziganek effect. Are you there? I can't see you, but I can see your logo. You need to hit your mute button. Something that we were thinking about doing, I don't want to throw you under the bus here, Charles, but we were thinking of doing a little bit of a, like you get at the beginning of cinema shows of, switch your phones off and all of this kind of stuff, and how to mute and unmute your microphone. We were thinking whether you offer your services as a voiceover for the Fellowship podcast.
I'm not really sure what you're asking. So
yeah, it'll be like.
I'll be glad to help you however I can. But what precisely? A little instruction video before each podcast on how to attend the Google Meet. I think would be quite a lot of fun. So a lot of new time, because people use Zoom and not Google Meets. I think people struggle with unmuting the mic. I'll try one more time. Ziga. How about this? We'll start with this. In a world filled with completely insane people. Something like that. In a world filled with completely insane people, musicians are about to speak.
Brilliant stuff. Oh, we've been wanting Charles to say that for months now. We got it.
Well,
finally.
email me the details, and we'll figure out something.
Figure it out. Thank you so much.
Your guys have my email, so email me and kind of fill out what you want, and I'll take care of it.
Brilliant stuff. Well, I think that what I'm going to do is call it a night, because I have had a pretty hardcore couple of days. But just a few reminders that the competition that we're doing with the pizzicato thing with the vaults, if you go to thecrowhillcompany.com to resources and go down to composer challenges, you've still got until Sunday to submit some stuff from that. We always have a lot of fun listening to those things. And I'm really pleased to announce that tomorrow I'm going to be doing some kind of, I wouldn't call them master classes, but just advice classes with none other than Ellery and Ed. And we do have a French speaker here at Crow Hill, so we're going to do a bit of a breakdown of people's arrangements, pocket strings arrangements, over Zoom, and one of them is going to be in French, which I think is really exciting, and part of the way that we hope to expand all of our activity here at Crow Hill. Also, just a quick kind of, I don't like to hawk too much here, but if you're interested in glass strings, it's going to be coming off promo over the next 24 hours. So that's worth checking out. But also tomorrow, big announcement, pianobook.co.uk. We're putting it back on track, and we have a new creative director who is going to give it the time and attention and love and focus that it needs. And I've tried out some submissions from Piano Book this month, and they are simply incredible. So well worth checking out. And if you haven't visited pianobook.co.uk or haven't visited it for a while, I would really recommend going and having a look, seeing how we're dusting things off. We've been optimizing the site so it works a lot better. And I've just stuck a couple of things up there, including two things where I've actually done my own scripting. I promise not to do too many videos about that because it's a bit of a rabbit hole. But anyway, with that note, and I just wanted to go back to Merlin's point, that it is, I think, such a valid comment. We talk so often about people finding your own voice, people, doing stuff that's original. But I think that, and touching on what Charles said about that vocal session, I think finding an ability and a confidence in a way that you can express your vulnerability is maybe one of the unsung about traits that take people from someone who is talented or able to someone who is able to communicate and relay something that is truly special. So I think that is something worth thinking about. And just to return to whom I started with, my brother Keaton, I find it really difficult to listen to his albums because he's so utterly vulnerable. And in fact, his last album I've never listened to because it's all about my dad, and I believe my dad is singing on it in his deep bass baritone voice. And it's too raw for me. But it's certainly part of his success is that ability to not hide behind a mask or a microphone or a pop shield or auto-tune, but to be vulnerable. On that note, love to you all. Thank you so much for joining. We'll be back to Wednesday next week. And then the week after, I'm going to be coming to you from a lake in France, which will be fun. Well, not actually in a lake, next to a lake, with hopefully some raclette being scraped off onto a bit of bread for me. Anyway, lots of love. See you soon. Thanks, everyone, for your contributions.
If you feel like you are losing your grip, might suffer a trip or abandon ship, open a